This is Gators Breakdown, and we got a treat this week. We got another guest. Last time we had a guest was Tennessee week, and that was pretty good for us. But here I am, David Waters again, and Joey V is our midweek Gators Breakdown podcast, and taking us into enemy territory this week as the Gators travel to Fayetteville. You know him from Gridiron Now, SEC Breakdown with us here. Chad Neipling. Chad, how you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. Ready to talk it up. It's going to be a good game this weekend, I think. It's going to be a good matchup.
Oh yeah, for sure. Joey, anything you want to say to Chad right quick before we dive into the Arkansas preview here?
Yeah, I mean, I've been following Chad for a long time. He really knows his stuff. If you're an Arkansas fan, follow this guy on Twitter. I mean, he's there. He knows. He talks to the coaches. He's in there. I'm looking forward to his knowledge that he's going to spit for us tonight.
That's right, Chad. What are you working on for Gridiron Now this week with dealing with Arkansas?
Really just kind of taking a look at how they're going to bounce back after the bye. They had a lot of guys that had to take some rest this last week, in particular a lot of starters. Austin Allen, after dealing with his knee coming out of Auburn, he comes back in Sunday. He had a pretty lengthy practice on Sunday, so he came back in. And him and Jeremy Sprinkle, tight end, both were both at 100% go and ready to take it on. But you've got a couple guys that are probably going to miss. They expected Dietrich Wise, starting defensive end, to be back tonight, but he didn't make it into practice. They try to hold him out a little bit more. And you've got the starting right tackle, Brian Wallace, that's out. So those are kind of some things I'm looking at, is how they've tried to jumble up this roster, and they're trying to make something happen out of what they've got so far on this roster, and try to finish out November with a strong finish. But can they do it? That's the biggest question. And, Florida's going to be a big task for them. So I'll be working at that and taking a look at how Florida matches up with this Arkansas team.
Yeah, we'll dive into that a little bit here too. But you can find Chad on Twitter at SEC_Chad. Like I said, you can find him Gridiron Now, SEC Breakdown. But Chad, let's go dive into Austin Allen a little bit. You mentioned he might have been banged up with a knee injury, but it's not the traditional Brett Bielema Arkansas offense that we've seen with Allen. Probably more success has come from the passing game instead of the running game. What makes Allen stick out a little bit more than where they can rely on him a little bit more than past quarterbacks that you've seen under Brett Bielema?
Yeah, you really take a look at – you hit a nail on the head when you start talking about the actual identity of the offense. This identity – you look at them this year, they're 12th in the conference in rushing, and the last two seasons they've been in the top 5, and that's just something that's just kind of it's not part of what the DNA is for Arkansas. That being said, they still chew up a lot of time. They're leading in time of possession, but also that can be a double-edged sword. What helps is when you've got a guy like Austin Allen who's willing to stay in that pocket. Up until the last second, he's willing to take the hits in order to get in order to let the pass plays kind of unfold a little bit. And I do think having a year with Dan Enos as an understudy to his brother Brandon Allen really paid off. Enos, being a former quarterback himself at Michigan State, was an all-conference guy in the Big Ten, turns around and head coach Central Michigan, comes down, he's offensive coordinator. The guy just really knows how to work with quarterbacks. You go and you look at Brandon Allen in 2014 and compare him to the Brandon Allen you saw in 2015, and it was almost night and day. So, just a lot of progression, teaching them how to go through the reads. And Austin's just a different cat, man. When he gets out there on the field, he's a monster. He's got an attitude and a moxie about him. He'll take the hits and bounce right back up and start chewing at his offensive lineman, and that's the type of guy you need on the field at all times, I think. And his attitude and persona have kind of bled off a little bit on this team.
Chad, we kind of talked about Arkansas offense just now, but what about Arkansas's defense? No one's ever accused Florida of being an offensive juggernaut, but Arkansas has given up 221 yards on the ground per game this year, and I think they're 87th in scoring defense nationally. Florida's run game seems to have gotten going the last couple of weeks. And, now getting back basically both their other running backs that they were missing on Saturday. How do you think Arkansas is going to be able to handle Florida's running game?
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest key. And, that's been a big issue, as I told you guys before we got started. A lot of it has been, as far as gap discipline and things of that nature, setting the edges. They've had an issue with that. this season, and especially more so against teams where they've had a hefty run, a dose of running. You look at Auburn. Auburn absolutely annihilated them, and that was a mixture of downhill running and tempo. And a lot of people wanted to lean on the fact, well, that was their 8th game, whatever it may be. They were on a pretty long stretch, but the fact of the matter is the defense was porous for the majority of the season. And I know a lot of local media guys will try to point out the fact that this team is 11-4 in 15 games, but the fact of the matter is they're 5-4 versus the SEC, and they're 6-0 versus out-of-conference games that weren't exactly all that stellar. And so you go back and you take a look at the fact that this defense statistically is already on track to be worse than they were last year, and last year's defense was pretty rough. The 2014 defense was pretty stellar in the fact that it was one of the better defenses in the conference, and there was a lot of rumor that this was going to be that same type of defense coming into this season, and we just haven't seen it. Up front, they don't get the push. We're not seeing a lot of blitzes. We're not seeing a lot of mixtures in the defense. Probably one of the better mixtures that we saw was versus Louisiana Tech right there, where they kind of mixed things up a little bit. Now, this week coming into this game, there's a little bit of a change in the depth chart because we're not really sure what's going to happen with Dietrich Wise. He didn't make it at practice tonight, starting defensive end, a guy that's supposed to be, was supposed to be touted as one of the guys that possibly would be an NFL prospect, considering his dad was as well, but that just hasn't panned out for him. So you turn around, you look, Randy Ramsey, linebacker/defensive end, kind of gives me hope that maybe we'll see a little bit of a 3-4 type of defense, but at the base we're going to see 4-3. And if they start getting into passing situations, you'll see the 4-2-5. And if they go 4-2-5, I'm sorry, but the run game they'll run all over them on the field. If they can maintain their gaps and Florida comes at them with more of a type of an Alabama type of defense that we've seen, or offense that we've seen, in the last couple of years, where it was a little more tempo oriented, I think that Arkansas can hang with them a little bit. But if they start going up tempo and running downhill at them, I think Arkansas is going to have a very, very long day up front. They just have not been that much of a penetrating defense on the defensive line, and that was an area where they were touted early on to be very, very strong coming into the season.
One more question for you, Chad. I know since Brett Bielema has been there, the offensive line has been a strength. I mean, they've had pretty much monstrous human beings on the offensive line, and this year it actually seems to be a weakness for Arkansas. Is that, how big as a concern is that against Florida's front seven in their ridiculously good defense?
It's a huge issue. This is something I talked about with some guys yesterday on the radio, and it's an area where if you've watched Arkansas at all this season, their right side of the line has struggled immensely. They've rotated a couple of different guys. Colton Jackson has floated from right guard to right tackle. You've had Brian Wallace, who's injured, and we don't know his status for sure coming into the game, who's been starting right tackle previously, who's also played right guard. Then you turn around and you've got left guard Hjalte Froholt, who's out of Denmark, who played in IMG there in Florida, a 4-star defensive lineman, that this is actually going to be his 9th game to have ever played on the offensive line, and he's played the left guard position. So you've got a lot of new faces on that offensive line, and they've tried multiple combinations, and it's been this way since spring. When the spring came out, they had a mixture of guys up there in the spring, and with new offensive line coordinator Kurt Anderson, who is also the Buffalo Bills offensive line coach, who's now at Arkansas, got a 1-year contract. He's more of a technician. He's not the scheme-based type of guy that you saw with Pittman. Pittman understood the entire offense and how the offensive line's part played in that. Kurt is he's a technician, as most NFL guys are. He's all talking about the fundamentals, placements, things of that nature. And so we've seen a little bit of juggling with the offensive line. You've only got 2 guys back from last year, Dan Skipper and, of course, your center, Frank Ragnow, and those are it. You lost Denver Kirkland. You lost Sebastian Tretola, probably 2 of your bigger guys that you needed this year. Tretola graduates, and, of course, Denver Kirkland left early, and had he stayed another year, I think that would have been a big impact for them. But they've lost they just haven't been able to replace it. And I think the Pittman effect really hit them this last year because the recruiting on the offensive line, they just don't have the depth that they've had in the past. And let's be honest, Bielema's even admitted to it in press conferences. they haven't recruited that as well as they should have in the last class. And I think this year they're going to have to go at least 4 or 5 deep on offensive linemen in a class, and they're going to have to be 4-star caliber guys. Bielema's always prided himself since being at Wisconsin as a developmental guy. You look at the team a couple years back in 2013, they played LSU in Houston. That whole offensive line was fifth-year seniors. Those were all his guys. And so that's something that he's always tried to base himself off of, and we're not seeing that. In the SEC, you're lucky if you get guys for 3 years, maybe 2 if you redshirt them, and that's just the way it is in this conference. Guys go quickly as you get them. And so that's something he's going to have to adjust to. And I think offensive line-wise, he wasn't expecting maybe the hit that he got. Maybe he thought he had more talent. Of course, Pittman leaving really didn't help in recruiting at all. So I think they're really kind of paying that. And be that as it may, Bielema's got about a $16 million buyout. So Arkansas fans are going to have to deal with it for at least another year or 2. So that's just kind of the way it is this year. It'll be tough for them. But if you can't run the ball, Arkansas just really struggles offensively. So you hit the nail on the head. It's going to be really tough for them. Florida's defense is fast and strong, and that's something that this Arkansas offensive line has not done well with. Go and watch the Auburn game and turn that film on and watch particular guys on the right-hand side, especially like Jake Rawlinson, the graduate transfer from Texas. Man, he was on skates. Granted, the poor guy was playing with that bum ankle. It's just those type of situations that have allowed Arkansas's run game to be so abysmal this year and be ranked 12th in the conference.
Chad, what's the mindset of you've been around the team, you go in the locker room, you're around the coaches. The mindset of the games you've lost are not necessarily games that you were expected to win anyway. But a little people were kind of maybe expecting Arkansas to take that next jump and be right behind those teams. Is that still kind of the mindset, or are they still really disappointed from these 3 losses that they have going into this after the bye week and going into this Florida game?
I think, in all honesty, being around the team and kind of getting around it, being around that confidence that I felt around them, especially coming into the season, I really think they felt like they could beat A&M. Of course, A&M has proven that Chavis made a promise in the spring saying that they would be a lot better on run defense and things of that nature. And it's held true. The defense has been stellar for A&M. And it was able to stop Arkansas. I think that confidence kind of took a hit in that game. Alabama at home, the fans were absolutely rabid. You could feel things vibrating in the stadium. It was absolutely insane, the environment. But going into the fourth quarter, coming out of the third quarter, fans started exiting the stadium relatively quickly. And I honestly think you could see some of the emotion in Bielema after that game during the press conference. I honestly think that he thought coming into that game that they were going to have a shot at beating Alabama. But Jalen Hurts is the real deal, and that defense is absolutely ridiculous, guys. Seeing them up close. And I think they're going to have to face another one this weekend that's that way. Ole Miss, close win. Again, the fans played a big part in that. They stayed all the way through the end of the game, and they were able to pull that one out on the last drive. I was down there on the sidelines for the last 5 minutes of that one and got to see that final drive. And it was really neat to see because they absolutely just took it to Ole Miss's defense, and that was something we hadn't seen so far that year. And you kind of felt maybe they were going to make the turn against Auburn. You go down to Auburn and lay the biggest egg that you've laid under Brett Bielema so far in his tenure as a head coach. And quite honestly, they've talked about it this week, the coordinators, the players. They've all talked about the fact that they did not want to come back on a Sunday and have to relive that type of moment again. That was just a feeling that they have not been able to wash out. It's a feeling they haven't been able to get past. And I think it's something that, honestly, they're going to struggle with. And I think they're looking at Florida as a possibility to try to get back on track. If they take a loss against Florida on Saturday and then they have LSU the next weekend, it's going to be tough for them. I think LSU is riding a high right now. Orgeron has them playing really well in play-action offense. This is going to be an extremely tough next 2 weekends for them. And, I'm curious to see how they bounce back after getting punched like they did at Auburn. Auburn was an embarrassment for that program, not just as a program as a whole, but for the coaches and the players. They've all felt it this last week, David. It's something like I haven't seen before under Brett Bielema. They're been very emotional, been very much so trying to bounce back, but you can tell they're carrying the weight of that loss on their shoulders right now.
All right, Chad, one more and we'll let you go. I really think the best matchup, on this, what we're going to see when Arkansas's on offense and Florida's on defense, you got Jared Cornelius, Keon Hatcher, Drew Morgan, Jeremy Sprinkle going against, Drew, Jalen Tabor, Tease Tabor, Quincy Wilson, Duke Dawson, Marcus May, size up, Austin Allen and his receivers in that Florida secondary.
Yeah, that's really where I think the matchup lies this weekend. It's going to be in the trenches, but at the same time, it's going to be, can Austin Allen? If you take the pass game away, and Arkansas, of course, we've seen they just haven't been able to get the push up front to get the run game and get those gaps solidified. Auburn took that away from them and then turned around and took the passing game away from Austin Allen, and he made mistakes that he typically didn't make. So if you're able to do that, you eliminate anything that they're going to be able to do, and you take that whole time of possession and you flip it on them. And then, of course, it becomes that double-edged sword like we talked about. I think in this situation, when you're talking about those corners and these wide receivers, that's going to be a fun matchup because guys like Keon and Drew Morgan, they're very physical wide receivers, and so is Cornelius. They're used to trying to get hands on people, and they're used to getting very physical. They play that way, and that's the way Bielema coaches them, is to be very physical wide receivers. At the same time, Florida does the same thing offensively. You'll see guys with crack blocks and things of that nature that they like to do, on the offensive side of the ball. So it's something that the defense is going to recognize. But that being said, these guys, there's a lot of them. You got to turn around. You look at you got Reed, you got several other guys. Petway, who's a redshirt sophomore, a redshirt freshman. He's a sophomore this year, but a redshirt freshman classification. A guy that is big and physical. You turn around and you talk about Sprinkle. Sprinkle is a mismatch nightmare for a lot of teams just because of how big he is and how athletic he is. He's like an O.J. Howard, for Arkansas and how they utilize him, but they put the ball in his hands a lot more. Then you've got Austin Cantrell, who's a tight end at 270, 275, and running a 4.6 40. This kid is an absolute bust when he gets the ball in his hands. And it's fun to watch him because a lot of guys don't expect that big guy to get the ball in his hands, so it's pretty fun to watch. But I think when you see Tez and these guys, they're going to be able to put the test to them, and I think that's going to be the real big matchup is who can physically hold the other one down. I expect them to go man. I expect Florida to get there and get in their faces. I think Florida should be more than confident in what they've got in the secondary physicality as far as being physical, speed, and athleticism. They're going to be able to hang. These wide receivers are going to have their day cut out for them. But Jerry Cornelius is one of the elite guys in the conference. Doesn't get a lot of talk, doesn't get a lot of praise, but he's one of the more productive wide receivers in the conference, and I love watching him play. But it's going to be absolute blast to watch him go up against Tez and these other guys. And I love to see how Jeremy Sprinkle handles the matchup against this fast, physical defense.
Ed, thank you much, man. We're definitely looking forward to this game. I think, since you and I have known each other, this is the first time Florida and Arkansas have played. So I know you and I will be on the phone as much as we can. I know you're in the press box, so it's kind of hard to hit that route of communicating. But I'm sure we'll be in tune with each other on Saturday.
Yeah, hopefully Florida doesn't make it 10 straight, David.
That is right. That was a good stat there. Yeah, 9-0 with the in the SEC. Florida is versus Arkansas. So yeah, going against that magic number 10. But Chad, thanks for joining us. And
thank you, Chad.
Yep. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on, and I'll be talking to you guys on Saturday. So let's keep it. We'll chat it up. We'll talk. I'll send you guys some photos, and take care, man. And I won't razz you guys, so don't worry about it. I'm sure if Arkansas can at least show up a little bit and make it interesting for the first half, it'll be great. But I'm hoping for a really, really good game. I'm hoping for a very physical matchup between two teams, and we get to see something fun to kick off the month of November.
You're selling Arkansas short, man. Shoot, I'm worried about this game.
I just don't have confidence. I have watched this team fall apart this year. My confidence it's taken a hit. So it's not what we were.
Starting to sound like Georgia fans before the game on Saturday.
No, I'm gonna tell you.
I had Georgia fans saying, "Take it easy on us."
I will take Austin Allen over Eason twice on Sunday and every day of the week, and I will definitely take this offense over what Georgia has every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
No, Georgia's offense is terrible. Oh my gosh, we were just talking about actually me and David on Saturday. We're talking about how Jim Chaney was a horrible hire.
Dude, he's the worst. Don't get me started. I'll take up the rest of the
show. I told everybody, Chad Neipling told me Jim Chaney was not going to be a good hire for Georgia, and it has shown its face as of right now. So if you want to listen to Chad about that, go dip into our SEC breakdown archives. I'm sure you can find it there. So, Chad, thanks.
Bad thing to say about that man.
All right, Chad, thanks, man.
Take care, man.
All right, Joey. So yeah, we talked. Of course, Florida going to Arkansas for this. First SEC West matchup of the season. But remind you again, folks, this is SEC Breakdown. You can find us on YouTube. No, Gators Breakdown. This is Gators Breakdown, not SEC Breakdown. But you can find us on the SEC Breakdown YouTube channel. But you can find Gators Breakdown on SoundCloud and on iTunes. Look us up there for all your audio versions there. But yeah, Joey, Florida road game, first road game for Luke Del Rio. Of course, this was his first. It's his first true road game. Of course, last week at Jacksonville, neutral site game, so not a true road game. But what did you see from him playing in Jacksonville? And now, can that translate to his first true road game and going to Fayetteville to play Arkansas?
Well, his 2 games since return from injury, he hasn't looked very sharp. It's making me a little nervous, and I think that actually I'm more nervous about that than anything on Saturday. We know the defense is going to show up. We know the running game's probably going to show up. I'm just worried about how Del Rio is going to play. He's had 4 interceptions in his last 2 games. Haven't been pretty, so I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. And that first interception against Georgia was inexcusable. We have labeled him a game manager, and that has turned out to be true. But when you're even that game manager type, he won this job because he was the smart option. He knew what to do. When you're rolling to your right and you throw back in the middle of the field, you're showing me you still are not – you're forcing things, and that's not what you were, picked to do. But he shored it up. He still didn't have a great game after that, but, the big mistakes weren't there as far as forcing passes where they could get picked off. He missed a couple of reads still where routes were wide open, and he just never saw the receiver open. So I'm with you. The biggest worry for me is Luke Del Rio and his play right now, and it's really scary that it's his first true road game and see if he can pick it up there. And you mentioned the running game. Of course, it looks like now Mark Thompson, Jordan Cronkrot would be back. But I have to go back and look at this Georgia game. Even though the yardage wasn't there, I still like what I saw in short yardage situations from Jordan Scarlett, LaMichael Pirine, and this offensive line.
Yep, I did too. I think our offensive line is actually getting better, and which I really, really like. Del Rio, he was hurried a few times, but to be honest, that's probably one of the best games they've had all season. And Georgia's defensive line is pretty good. That's probably the strength of their team, actually, is their defensive line. I really like the push that Florida's offensive line got, especially in short yardage situations, like you said, goal line situations. We want to see more creativity from Doug Nussmeier. He had a few creative plays on Saturday. I was really happy about that, and that's what we need to see.
Agree. So, Joey, I think if you look at this offense right now, yeah, it's not great. The yardage isn't there. This Georgia game kind of to me was the perfect microcosm as to what this offense can be. It won't dominate the stat sheet against good defenses, but if it can be opportunistic, if it can convert third downs, if they can score in the red zone, then I think everything is still in front of this team. It's hard to beat the Alabamas, and if LSU's on top of their game, LSU of the world playing that style. You hope the offense can find its groove with those games. But how far do you think this style of play can take Florida? Do you see them winning out the rest of the regular season games if they can play field position ball and let the defense take over, or do you still think this offense needs to find a better groove if they want to represent in Atlanta and with still only one loss in that game?
If the offense doesn't get better, this team's not going to go to Atlanta. They're going to lose 2 of the next 3 games. You're not going to beat Arkansas and you're not going to beat LSU. You're just not. You got 2 real good away, going to be really tough. And we know the defense is going to travel. Defense and special teams always travels. The offense is what's got to show up. And, I really think that the playmakers are there. Callaway finally emerged as the guy on Saturday, which we saw firsthand, which was really special. But the question is, can Del Rio be a guy to get him the football? I look at this offense and the talent that's on offense, And if Florida had a quarterback that was reliable, this offense would be pretty lethal. Quarterback position has been holding the Gators back for the last 6 years. That one position has literally ruined an entire program. Supposed to come in and not be a game breaker or a world beater, but he was supposed to be a manager. He was supposed to take care of the football, and he was supposed to be efficient. And to be honest, the last 2 weeks he's been anything but. And that's something that really concerns me.
Agreed there. So we look at the offense, and yes, right now it's okay. It's getting the job done. They're beating the teams they're supposed to beat, but the schedule's getting much tougher in November. And I agree with you, Joey. There's at least just a tiny step forward can really do a lot for this team. One more thing about the defense before we wrap this up, we had a great Arkansas preview there. Going to Arkansas, and Chad mentioned the struggles in the running game. You brought that up as well. Do you see any way Florida? Of course, you only can go back to that second half against Tennessee, where a disappointing performance, and that was on the road. You see any type of performance like that if Florida gets up big? Do you see any way Arkansas can come back just because of what we saw on the road at Tennessee earlier this season?
No, Arkansas doesn't have the defense that Tennessee has. So I don't see Arkansas being able to shut Florida down if Florida does get a lead. And also not only that, Tennessee was able to run the ball on Florida in the second half and open up the passing lanes for Dobbs to make some big throws down the field. And Arkansas doesn't have the running ability to be able to do that. So Florida can literally sell out to the passing game on Saturday, which is going to really put Allen in some really tough positions.
Right. And, okay, Joey, right before we go, playoff rankings were released before we came on the show. Florida come in at 11th. Any surprise there? You think that's about right? I think I saw you tweet out that's about what you expected.
About right.
Yep. So, and so with teams in front of Florida, right in front of Nebraska at 10, Auburn at 9, Wisconsin at 8. Wisconsin plays Nebraska and Ohio State play this weekend. So, more than likely Ohio State, Nebraska in front of Florida. Both of those teams, Florida wins. One of those would drop. So Florida would definitely be top 10 next week with a win over Arkansas with the games and matchups in front of them. So, Joey, quickly, what's your prediction as Florida travels to Fayetteville to take on the Razorbacks?
Man, I'm worried. Tough road game, I'm really concerned. I'm a little less concerned now than I was, 2 months ago about this game, but I think Arkansas keeps it real close. I think this game's a nail-biter. I think Florida pulls it out 21-17.
I'm going to agree with you. I think it's still a close game. I think the thing I'll keep going back and looking at is Jim McElwain wins the games he's supposed to win. He's done it for his 2 seasons now at Florida. He still hasn't lost a game with his starting quarterback. He has a starting quarterback. This is the team Florida should beat, in my opinion, with the way Arkansas has been playing lately and the way Florida maybe can run the ball. But I still agree with you. It's going to be a close game. Somehow I think Florida scores a little bit more in this one somehow, but I'm sure we'll go 27-21 Florida, escaping with a win in Fayetteville and coming back with South Carolina at home for the final home game of the season next week. So, Joey, anything else before we head out of here?
Nope. I just really, really, really want to see the offense just show some sort of improvement. That's one thing I'm really looking forward to. 75% of that game on Saturday was just ugly to watch.
It was. But we had fun. Joey and I met up in person for the first time, and it won't be the last. So hopefully we can make that definitely a tradition in Jacksonville every year. And, of course, we'll meet up in Gainesville when we hit those trips there maybe next week as the Gators take on South Carolina. So this is Gators Breakdown. As I mentioned, you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on SoundCloud. You can find us on iTunes. And we're everywhere. You have many options there to enjoy this Gators Breakdown podcast. So for Joey, this is David, and this has been Gators Breakdown.